Oh god, what have I done?
Hello, I'm Sprum, and you're dumb. My prior video about barber beats was interesting to make. It was a bit of development hell, but through it I ended up finally biting into a genre that had never really hooked me prior. Since I'm working on another serious video about industry bullshit because that's what put Maroon 5 on the radio, I thought I would break with an easier video on some of the albums I listened to, a slight breakdown of them with some commentary. I wrote most of this in a day, just because I want to make something normal for once, so yeah, it's not the best commentary, but I'm probably not going to do full videos on most of these albums, and I want to do some more of these, so we'll see if this works. To expand on some ideas I had in the Parker Peeps video, some extra notes on vaporwave and genre. For the latter, I mentioned a lot of albums that aren't technically vaporwave to show how much the genre had expanded past its original ideas, and how much those ideas aren't really exclusive to it. And that, eventually, a subgenre like Margarita Meeps would have inevitably happen. Hyperpop did this too, both started out as anti-corporate irony and slowly became more accepted because that's what all genres do. Punk did this. A lot of people fall off a genre when the anti-corporate sheen fades, and honestly, I can't blame them, but it's not really possible to completely separate the corporate from the analog. Everything is corporate now. Get over it. Genre is weird and doesn't really exist in the movement or moment, more in the past. While it was about marketing, it's not like genres like slam, signal wave, and no wave really differ that much from screamo, field recordings, and post-hardcore. On the first note, and I'm sorry I didn't bring some of this up, vaporwave works through not only slowed down samples, but a lot of motifs, themes, and symbols. While nostalgia is the main emotions, it is mainly shoved into the grinder. This is why later vaporwave, like Death's Dynamic Shroud and Hallmark 87, have a much more vague attachment. The genre itself isn't really just the samples, it's the mixing, it's that vibe it has that's not really describable. Also, it's mall soft, not mall core. I apologize. I will repent by praying to the cat puke stain on my carpet. The trick of using familiar samples works really well with themes like death and liminality, but also in the sense of being from a parallel universe of some kind. The genre itself doesn't have a genre because it's a feeling. Floral Shop isn't particularly nostalgic, but it sure has that dreamlike quality. There were a few albums far before Floral Shop, Sunset Core, and EccoJams that have allusions to vaporwave like Boards of Canada, Brian Eno, Osamu Sato, and many more. Anyway, despite being told this wasn't just samples of the original Echo the Dolphin horror game on Genodrive, I was surprised to learn it wasn't just samples of the original Echo the Dolphin horror game on Megasys. There was another EccoJams I haven't listened to because it wasn't Chuck Persons. I would best describe this album as a long, harrowing compilation of life memories. The samples are distorted and distant, but they're also very clear, on top of harsh beats filled with revolver. It's just really dense and hard to articulate. Even then, it feels more like it's meant to be a melancholic mix than a story. Echo is more of a motif distorted beyond belief on the album cover to make it clear that it was merely one of the memories, but the remaining memories are too old to be clear. The album just kind of gave me the sense of playing the game in a room while the rest of the world passes by, but it remains the centerpiece, if that makes sense. I listened to Magic Oneohtrix Point Never, and it sounded like Hudson Mohawk. It's not really vaporwave, more a series of electronic experiments. Not really my taste, but if you like the kind of electronica Jake Joseph makes, you might like this. I would best describe Magic as tuning into a radio station of strange experiments that leave your mind as soon as it enters. One that can only be found in a moment where you're most likely to remember the experience but forget about the exact music. A station designed for nobody. I was shocked at how great this album was. Most vaporwave albums rely on older or obscure samples, usually in flavors of band, ballroom, jazz, or blues, in order to evoke that sad tone. This album uses samples from Carly Rae Jepsen, Dua Lipa, and Taylor Swift, and despite how catchy it is, the album is mostly about letting go. It's as if the album is a compilation of songs from this person, their last remnants holding on to the living world, left as the person relives those memories to see that person before finally being able to let go of the fact that they're gone. Their only coil left is this soundtrack. could also be about rediscovering yourself after you've changed. It could be about holding faith in the idea of a person. Even the album cover for the mid-2000s 3D design really hits the themes of the album. I never listened to this at the time because I wasn't listening to this kind of music in 2021, but I'm glad I finally stuck my head in. You've no doubt seen this cover in those The Most Mysterious Album of 4chan videos. I don't remember if I did put this album in the video because I had a point to be made about secrecy. Anyway, you probably want to know what this sounds like, right? Personally, I was expecting breakcore, not Britpop. Soft rock, electronic skiffs, and honestly great vocals. This is a breakup album in many ways, but mainly a breakup album about a doomed, distant relationship. The instrumentals are dense and fuzzy, vocals are clear and loud, and the writing is intense and desperate, as the album tells of a relationship towards its depressing end. While I can't tell why this album from 2001 uses anime profile picture, the title Death Metal is actually a reference in the opening track. Death metal is just one of the many motifs, and perhaps anime is another one, particularly in line with escapism and finding solace in art in rough moments, especially when real relationships are fleeting. I had a similar reaction to this as I did with Oblique Occasions, so I'll keep this short. Both albums give me this light, jazzy noise over technical beats, which reminded me a lot of the first Portal, this sad, looming, and empty ambience in reference to how quiet and eerie the situation is. It feels like, in a world with the most advanced technology possible, it still seems the main soundtrack to all of it is light instrumental jazz with no people in it, elevator music with no real destination to wait for. The former album is a lot more futuristic, while the second album feels more isolated. The former is about the moment, the latter is about the mood. Between Two Worlds is a great exercise in emptiness, however I completely got sidetracked by Hologram Person, which was released in December last year. Might sneak it onto my recap video in June, but either way, what the fuck is this? Hologram Person is one of the creepiest and freakiest albums I've ever heard. It isn't even vaporwave anymore, it's full on dark ambient, it's freaky. I swear, these vaporwave bands make the best fucking dark ambient music possible. Hologram Person is like staring at a rogue AI's definition of a person, but you can see they don't understand what it is, only what it looks like and acts like. This album feels like technology creating the hollow cold life which moves us but isn't life. It feels hard to listen to because you feel that construction but you don't know what it's doing. I need to devote a full video to this. Eternal Judge is a vaporwave artist who, while creating Consciousness Bleeds, was in a dark, painful place, and what came out was this. This is probably the most barber beats of the albums in here, but it is fucking creepy.
Freaking creepy.
Freaking creepy.
The first track contains this rising and lowering bass, which sounds both comforting and cute, while also the sense of something obvious approaching you. The second track contains ominous synths playing on repeat for most of the song, with a dark ambient drone playing in the latter. The third track slowly builds up to a gradual meltdown which explodes in the first track. It's an album which embodies the sense of crumbling and self-destruction under neglect and isolation. It is one of the most fear-inducing albums on this planet, all through sounding like a complete meltdown in the worst moments of one life, repetitive and all. On a lighter note, this is one of Eternal Judge's many mixtapes and aliases. Eternal Sunset is a nice, warm album that... Ethereal Sunset is a nice, warm album that really makes you feel like an eternal sunset.
It is the world's largest concentration of gypsum dunes.
If you want something really relaxing to escape to, try this, even if the simulation of Sierra Beach is a bit overdone in those circles. Selected Memories is this strange exploration of old age and memories built into the worst feelings of memory loss, anterograde amnesia, and loss of soul. Many of the songs feel like old recollections of prominent memories in a dance hall. Listening to big band, enjoying recordings in the solace of your room, and even traumatic memories in the track September 1939. Fun fact, that song literally jump scared me when it played and made me pop out of my seat with how much it shocked me. As for an empty bliss, it sits in a strange place. Both the most accessible Caretaker album to many, and also that. Even for as overplayed Labette Delay is, I still think Empty Bliss as a whole really succeeds in feeling like an estranged life in middle dementia. Intact memories, but also weakened by condition as the brain rots in fatty membranes. Memories locked and tangled in plaque, strangled by prions. The album cover of a powdered donut smoking a ciggy is goofy, but also quite symbolic of the state a person finds themselves being locked down as their memories fades from a disease, forced to consult themselves on small moments of comfort and routine. I mentioned a lot of Basinski. I only listened to all of their albums. The Disintegration loops was a bit too serious and heavy for me to address, and it seems like something that I would do years away, provided I'm still doing this and alive. The loops paints an image of tragedy and slow decay of a height. The tapes slowly play again and again before slowly losing their character as the theme of light ambience becomes grayer and grayer. And of course, the album covers narrative of the tragedy at play. Melancholia is their most artistic expression, a collection of loops and ambience which is honestly one of their best. It feels hollow and cold, as if you're in a large building that seems ghostly and haunted but is always empty. Watermusic and its sequel are a collection of two water-drowned ambients, which give off that feeling of being in a large pool of near-infinite peaceful waters, comfort and calm waters, but the constant dread of drowning. Finally, my personal favorite project, Lamentations. While the usual Basinski affair, I would argue Lamentations is the strongest of their albums. Mainly, it's just the creepiest. I genuinely got unnerved listening to it at the time in 2020. There's also the fact the ambience, to me, is a lot less reliant on loops and rather focused on the atmosphere instead. It doesn't feel like you're living back memories as much as you're being forced to. The album cover looks more like a forest being flattened. It feels ghostly and haunted, and in a lot of cases it kinda is. There were many proto-vaporwave albums I should have mentioned and covered. However, that tone of empty ambience or even liminal ambience cannot go without the massive influence of Brian Eno. The album itself is mostly ambient background music, and if you need something in the background, he's perfect for that. The music itself has that passing melancholy of waiting for life to properly continue on, the middle section of when you're in downtime, preparing for that important moment. It's waiting. 15 minutes? God. While many hyperpop like Food House, Femtanil, and even 100 gecs all have the same sample and distortion cue, which expresses their genres, I honestly don't think any band has used that sound to really fuck with the listener like 1-800-PAIN does. Because the music is really stupid and dumb, but songs like Destroy Us All, Lurk, and Hurt are all hard bangers that make the Earth's core look weak. I love this band for just being able to command a harsh beat the way they do, on top of having some of the dumbest lyrics ever. I think the energy itself carries it, and while it's not vaporwave, it does share that mixture of being kind of in the middle, and yet it has all these really harsh funk-like beats. It's just brutal all the way through. I highly, highly recommend this band, and I wish they had more known because they're kind of awesome. Ignoring the creepypasta story attached to the project, which was kind of stupid, I didn't really like Begotten that much. I do like the way it explores hopelessness and death through some of the most unusual samples and distortions. I think it explores that feeling of preparing to die through an extremely miserable lens, and I think there's almost no other music project like it. The 6 albums are honestly really... That doesn't mean I like it. I mean, using the infinite staircase in Mario 64 as a sample sounds cool, if you actually do something with it. There's a lot I admire about Begotten, but more from a distance. There's a lot more I wish it was in the music itself. This was the album I cited when it came to corporate vaporwave, and honestly I'm not wrong about that. I don't like Glass Animals as is, but Dreamland was just very middle to me. Despite the fandom that surrounded it then and now, it's still excessively mediocre. I do like some parts about it. I think some of the songs are okay. Mixing indie rock and indie pop with hip-hop trap beats is interesting, and I think the album's tackle with memory and nostalgia is pretty sweet. However, when tracks like Heat Waves comes on, I desire a heat stroke. Its writing is kind of terrible in a lot of ways, and it feels more like an album cashing in on a bunch of vibes rather than doing anything. The whole album is vibes, and it sucks. It's lame. It's vaporwave for people who don't like vaporwave. That said, if you do like it, can you tell me why? Like, it has effort, but why? On to some more disturbing and darker albums. The dark ambient corner of vaporwave is my personal favorite. Earth is a cold and desolate look at a world which is only hostile to its inhabitants. It's a dark reflection of a world in which everything dies, in which everything grows blurry, in which the tracks invoke you in total desolation through it. It feels apocalyptical, like you're stuck in a blizzard that's just never ending, but you're not freezing to death. The world is growing colder and colder, the familiar imagery is fading, and everything's being covered in snow. I know this album is about grief. It tells the story of death and erasure through its morbid imagery. The cover alone shows that dynamic of a father comforting their daughter, but only in concept as the memory is enveloped with symbols of death. The familiar tracks and samples feel just completely empty and desolate. The darkness surrounding everything except the most obvious symbols, leading you to wonder what is left of this memory and relationship. It feels like trying to uncover something that just isn't there, no matter how hard you look. While I might do a video on this, it seems like something that's really hard to do. Despite clocking in at 100 minutes, I genuinely love Seraphim. And for context, a Seraphim is one of many biblical creatures from the Old Testament, and its mythos, representing an angel of divine being which ranks high in the heavenly hierarchy. A Seraphim itself is more of an angel instead of an eyeball, one that is defined as a snake, one that performs duties and is not respected but is still a high ethereal angel. That isn't entirely related to the album, nor to the predecessor Mur de Revs, but Seraphim is special to me. It feels like a long compilation of long, peaceful, cold thrones, which all culminate in one of the most odd albums, but also one of the darkest. I think this album borders right on being completely unnerving and perfectly nerving. Where the title, How to Disappear Completely, is finally succeeded, you disappear. Either way, it is one of the best, and I think if it didn't have that undertone of eldritch angels carrying out their duties, it wouldn't cross that threshold so well. Unrelated, I once heard a story, probably not in the Testament, about Seraphim, where they were encountered by somebody finding the Garden of Eden. They only moved by their wings and held completely still, loomed over to the person as they awoke miles away from the garden. Seraphim to me is about accepting a long-anticipated death, where nothing is there and you're coming to terms with the loss after a long bout of catharsis. It feels long and cold, but what else is it supposed to be? One of the few Mallsoft albums I brought up, Atrium is a collection of tracks with distant speakers, murmurs, and long echoing drones in brutalist corporate chambers. The album feels long and warm, but also feels infinite in the sense of naissance, cold with few people around. The echoes of humanity are temporary, the hallways are filled with only people who aim to enter and exit in tandem. The place once thought of a second place for people to live life, slowly turned into corporate highs and infinite chambers, abandoned over the years. The atrium of a beating heart only kept alive by the drywall which forcefully holds it up. Infinite hallways, endlessly longing for some purpose. It's all distant and forever as you explore its dying walls. This is the least vaporwave of the bunch, but I don't know when I'll ever bring it up. The album is only 5 tracks which loop endlessly. In the cover, a dark forest is illuminated with a strange eldritch figure observing from the corners. It's called Signal Wave, or at least that's the genre it's in, which I'm not familiar with, but the tone of the album is extremely dreadful. The cycle of being followed with something getting a little bit closer each time, with the only escape being that in each cycle it might get a bit further until it latches onto something else. The terror of being followed, but in the context the album applies, it is not following you. You are receiving someone's warning cry. They might not have made it. They've been followed this whole time by this thing, and it probably got to them, and all we know about it is this looping repeat for help. I didn't mention Geometric Lullaby, which sucks because they are one of the most important labels for ambient and vaporwave music. Prior to the label forming, or at the same time, I can't remember entirely, Towers was created as a project of strange experiments sewn together. It is a long 4-track project which has the listener exploring strange alien soundscapes, both familiar and unfamiliar to them. One that requires its own video, but what makes Towers excellent is for invoking familiar motifs and sounds in ways that are twisted to be threats. Everything feels slightly familiar, yet at every turn it feels like you're just not welcome here. The sound of water taps leaking out passing by sewers, electric shocks passing by an empty path, strange drones, cityscapes and sounds only visible for brief moments, and even a strange force following you through the alternative space replicated by drum beats like a marching band. It just feels unsafe. One problem with making videos on anything is that you're more likely to get a snap from negativity and reactions than genuine passion. While my video on the subject I stand by, I didn't make this channel to talk about current events. I did it to talk about music, and sometimes I just have to go out of my way to talk about something that no one else is, or in cases no one else is in this context. Plenty of people talk about everything, it's just hard to find. I thought making this video would be a good way to start talking about albums and songs I run into during these projects to keep my brain from melting into despair. I hope at least some of the people who watch my prior video will watch this, because I do want to take music seriously more than the context itself. It's incredible what you can do with mixing and distorting a sample, to bring out emotions like nostalgia, loss, aimlessness, despair, and failure, while confronting taboo subjects like grief, amnesia, and decay. These albums show that, along with being really good to listen to, not all of them, but they succeed in expressing that. Anyway, back to working on my video about music streaming. 25 minutes, goddamn.